Okay, so now you're
Okay, so
welcome to our last lecture
for this semester, SPARTA
And
Live.
We are very happy to have Rob Crosse here today. And hi, Rob.
Hi.
hello.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah, and we're gonna have a
Yeah.
Q&A session afterwards. We will post the link under this video. So now we will just give the word to you, Rob. Thank you for coming.
Okay. Yeah. Firstly, thank you to Till, Swinda, and Pia for inviting me. I am excited to present my work to you. And thank you for listening, even though I'm only staring into a little green light. I'm sure you are there, or hopefully. First I'll say, so my name is Rob Crosse and I live in Berlin. I've lived in Berlin for the last 3 years now. I used to live in London, where I studied at the Slade School of Fine Art, and then originally studied photography in Bournemouth. And yeah, I'm going to talk about some projects that I'm sort of working on in development at the minute, and then also about an exhibition that is on but closed, as they all are at the minute. So yeah, I guess as a sort of, I don't like really giving an overview, but in words so much. But I'm interested, or I use video photography and performance, looking at values around intergenerational relationships and care. And I quite often, this is a video still of a work that I'm developing at the minute, but I quite often place myself in male groups as a way to, or as a space to sort of question aging and desirability. So this is kind of sort of a bit behind the scenes. This is a work that I'm developing at the minute. This is a video where I've been filming a series of mechanics, a number of mechanics disassembling a car in preparation for restoration. So I'm particularly interested in the idea of restoration as opposed to repair, as the attempt to sort of bring something back to its original state, and thinking about what happens to the damage if it's no longer visible, and the sort of the values that are placed onto the idea of this sort of original state. So yeah, I like the way that I make videos is often like through prolonged periods of observation and engagement. And I've actually been spending 2 years now in this garage. I think maybe actually I'm just a little bit indecisive, and this is why it sort of takes a long time, but also partly it just takes a long time to sort of work out what it is that I'm looking at, and also what is my place within this space. And so actually this is like an image of the car after it's had its, in a way, sort of after it's had like its history removed, or this is the thing that I'm thinking about at the minute. So yeah, this is a video that I'm editing now, which will be formed part of an exhibition in July. And I'm going to come back to this right at the end. Yeah. And these are my house plants. I'm a bit obsessive about succulents and caring, in a way of sort of thinking about the car as like a caring for a history or caring for a past state. I'm also interested in caring for new growth. I'm kind of fascinated by succulents in the way that they appear to like form the formation of sort of new growth and where it grows out from, and how they sort of form these new structures. But also because I've spent a lot of time, so these are all cuttings that I've taken from friends mostly, and I've spent a lot of time at home, as we kind of all have recently, and my desire to sort of care for these small plants has actually ended up in me killing quite a few of them. So I was thinking about this in relation to care, that actually I talk to my plants, I stroke them, but there's also like a desire to apply more care somehow, and that often results in like overwatering. And so thinking about this like relationship of care as like always needs to be a sort of a two-way act, otherwise like there's like the danger of something sort of going wrong in some way, that like maybe there's like I wasn't listening to the plants or something, that and these are a series of photographs that I'm working at the minute. So I used to go to the Berlin the Botanical Garden a lot, to the greenhouse, and that's been closed this whole year, but the outside space, so there's a huge park of trees and other plants which is outside of the greenhouse, and so I've been spending a lot of time just walking around there, very thankful that this sort of outside space has stayed open, but then I started noticing these supports. So these are supports that are placed underneath either older or younger trees in order to encourage them to grow. But it's also, so there's like this caring act, but there's also this idea that the trees need to sort of grow in a particular direction. So these are also posts in order to prevent the branches from falling onto a path, or sort of growing in a way that's like not desired within the aesthetic of the park somehow. And also the fact that this is like a botanical garden, and so there's also this history of collecting specimens in this colonial project, and so these are sort of things that I'm thinking about. I have thousands of these. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you all of them, but these are just sort of some examples to think about, to give you a sense of like where my mind is going, and where some of these thoughts around care and intergenerational care. So I've also been reading a lot around tree support networks, and how older and younger trees support each other through sort of younger trees growing up slower in order to thicken their trunks, so that by the time they get bigger, by the older trees die, that they're strong enough to sort of to grow properly, to grow healthily rather. But I did make 2 of these prints into an exhibition. So this is the exhibition that I'm going to talk about. These are tree supports, simply titled Baumsteads 1 and Baumsteads 2. I'm learning German, by the way, and this is like a tree support for an older tree on the left-hand side here. This is a lilac, and then on the right, this is a fir tree. And these two images were shown alongside a video work as a sort of as a support, but also as like another sort of element to my work. On the left-hand side, this is Richard's side. So I should say quickly that this is an exhibition. This is the Ars Viva Prize, the first reiteration of it, which I won this year along with Richard Sides and Sung Chiu. And this is the first iteration of the exhibition as part of this prize. And this is in the Museum Angewandte Kunst in Frankfurt am Main. This is the one that's open, but sadly is closed, though hopefully at some point will be open again. So you can see that picture of the tree at the back on the wall, and the video next to that. These are my works, and the beautiful works in front of them are Sung Chiu's on the plinth, and then the hanging sculpture is Richard Sides, but I'm not going to talk about that. So I'm going to talk about that video in the background in a minute, but then also as part of this exhibition. So this was, we had all our works in this one room within the Museum Angewandte Kunst, and then I very kind of greedily had another space where I showed another work called Primetime, which I'm going to talk about now. And in the foreground here in the plinth, you can see a Flanierstock, it's called, which is part of the collection of the Museum Angewandte Kunst, which I chose to sort of sit alongside this work, which I liked in the way that it's sort of like this supporting structure, but it's also, it's made out of ivory. So it's also quite violent, and it's made up of sort of lots of individual parts. So it's also this very fragile object. And this video in the background is called Primetime, which is loosely based, well, not loosely, the name comes from this organization called Primetimers. And Primetimers is a event in order to sort of create this, to create a social network of support, basically. So I guess I'm interested in these support networks in particular, and thinking about I guess a lot of the discussions I've had with older men are like how to support, how to get support in older age if you're not supported by like immediate relatives. So this image on the left is actually, this is my sound recordist. So I made a film based around this group. I joined them so that as well as having these regular calendar meetings, they also once or twice during a year go on an excursion, so that not only are you meeting men, but members from your individual areas, that they come together and go on basically like a group holiday where members from different states can congregate together. And I joined them on one of these holidays, which was an excursion on a cruise ship. So this is both these images are sort of taken on a cruise ship. So these are some stills from the film. I quite often focus on gestures and body language as forms of communication as opposed to words. I find it much easier to talk or to say the things that I want to say, or the way that I view the world through images as opposed to words. Hopefully I'm not talking too much rubbish as I talk about my work, but yeah, words aren't things that sort of come naturally. And so a lot of the film sort of focus on these forms of communication of what's going on beyond spoken language. This is another still from the film. So this, I had never been to a silent disco before, but this took place on the ship. I'm in no hurry to go to another one again. I found it kind of quite a peculiar activity in that, yeah, this idea of sort of everybody listening to their own music and having different colors so the different colors of the headphones represent like the different selection of music that you're listening to, but it becomes this sort of really isolating activity because you can't actually speak to anybody while you're in it. So I used this in the film, and this moment of sort of isolation or searching. I guess the name Primetime comes from this idea of the violence behind the word, the violence behind the idea of there being a prime, because if prime represents not now, then it's always another time. And actually, some of the things that I do is about sort of challenging these ideas of age, around aging and age and desirability. And so I'm trying to question this idea of like that there has to be a prime. And so this was the ship that we went on. I didn't choose this ship specifically, but there was only one excursion that was taking place between when the film was funded and when I originally showed it. It was funded by Film Video Umbrella and Grundy Art Gallery. And these are images of the ship, which is called Celebrity Cruise. And it kind of reminded me, it reminded me of a lot of the gay bars that sort of emerged in a sort of reaction against a reaction to the AIDS epidemic, and in that there was a lot of gay bars that were sort of being built with these like chrome, steel, glass surfaces in order to create this idea or change the image into this idea that somehow that sort of represented like health, like a healthier place, but also was having a conversation with someone actually just now, but like maybe it's also about that these bars were also a way of like dealing with the grief somehow. But so I was thinking about this in relation to when I saw these images, and I had this sort of this image of these bars. It made me, I guess it's like this sort of faux opulence or something. It made me think about this book by Samuel Delaney. Samuel R. Delaney, who's been quite an important reference for me. This book in particular, to the left, Times Square Red and Times Square Blue, was quite a big influence, particularly for this film. He speaks much more eloquently than I do about the effects of gentrification on Times Square in relation to like the gentrification of bodily desire. And he sort of splits this book into encounters of his, where he writes about encounters of his own sexual explorations and the types of men and the sort of diversity and mixture of men of different classes that were able to take place in the space before it was gentrified, and how that was erased and these bodies were no longer sort of intermixing within this like gentrified space. And on the right is an essay by him called Ash Wednesday in the Boston Review, which I read after I'd made the film, but it's again, it's sort of a reference point that I return to, and this quote in the middle comes from that essay, where he actually describes a sex party with a group of primetimers in New York. So as well as sort of organizing social networks, Primetimers is also about exploring your own sexual desires. And he writes about this in his essay. And what really struck me about this essay is the way in which he describes bodies, particularly older bodies, in a way that I've never really heard before, in that's so sort of open and non-judgmental. And I was thinking about this before I made the film, I was thinking about how to sort of, whether it's possible to do the same thing with the camera than it is with the words that Samuel Delaney's used. So that was sort of a reference point for me, as well as these are some images from, I think these are from Alvin Baltrop and Leon Fink, but there were a number of other photographers and artists that were occupying this space, women as well as men. But this is the 70s and 80s New York Docklands area, which was very famous for cruising in particular, but also as sort of a queer like hangout for a lot of artists. And Samuel Delaney again sort of references this this idea of this space that is sort of pushed out and derelict within the city, that became like this almost utopia, but also, I mean, it was also like a dangerous space, and it's also like a collapsing space. But yeah, some of these were visual references that I was thinking about in trying to frame the group of primetimers on the ship. And so this is me with my director of photography called Deepa Keshvala, who is amazing and who I kind of pursued, or I really wanted for this film, because I'd seen her film on a number of other works, and the view of the camera is something that is very, I guess it comes from my training in photography, but the framing of the world as I see it is something that I'm trying to capture within video, and so sometimes I bring in other people. This video I showed you in the beginning in the car workshop is I've done everything myself, partly because of the situation now, and it's only me that can sort of enter this car garage space. But here I used a director of photography. I also had a sound recordist and a producer on board. But sometimes it helps me to sort of bring somebody else on board in order to, I guess, take a step back, but then also to maybe sort of have some distance to the image, but also to bring in another voice. And so this, like, maybe I'm being a bit controlling in this picture, but it wasn't always like this. I don't know, maybe Deepa will say otherwise, but it's like working this collaboration process between the how to film something is very important for me. And this is a close-up. This was a shot that did actually make the film. This is a shot of Gordon's sexy stomach, which appears in the film. I guess there's also like a directness. There's directness to the way that Deepa films that I think I wouldn't be able to sort of do if it was myself. I guess some of the work is also about showing the bodies that I find desirable shown in the way that I see them, or at least that's a part of what I was attempting to do with this film. This is another still from the film. And when I originally showed it, this is Grundy Gallery in Blackpool. So I made an image into a curtain. in order to, so you walked through this curtain to watch the film. And I like this idea of inviting the viewer to sort of enter the belly and create this sort of sense of also like maybe the environment of the ship representing this body as well. And this is on the back of this picture on the right is called crown. It's the top of someone's head, quite simply, yeah, called crown. And there were a few other images that I showed alongside this video, which I won't go into now. But yeah, so you walk through this curtain, and then you had this large projection. And I'd done a lot of recordings with different frequencies of the boat, of a lot of hums and sounds of the ship in order to create this vibration when you went into the room, so that there was also like this physical reaction to it. And I am going to play a clip from that now. So yeah, that was an extract from Primetime, which is 20 minutes long. Yeah, it doesn't have a beginning and an end, so it actually just loops. And in this way, there's always sort of this combination of like a rhythm of everyday or like a preparation for an expectation of something to happen that sort of never arrives. and yeah, there's this sort of this rhythm that I'm trying to replicate, which is like a wave, and that's something that I'm often playing with a when I'm making a work that doesn't normally have a beginning or an end. Oops, my screen's frozen a sec. Okay. Yeah, so this is the other video that is in the exhibition in Frankfurt. This is called Dear Samuel, which is again kind of a reference to Samuel Adelaide. Yeah, I'll talk a bit about that later. But so I was invited to a residency in Hong Kong by Videotage and Video Club, who have this exchange. They're organizations based in London and Hong Kong, and they have this exchange called Both Sides Now. So I would think I was part of Both Sides Now 5, and then was also hosted by Eton Hotel as part of my residency. And when I was invited to go and was doing a bit of research, I came across somebody called Dr. Travis Kong, who wrote this book called Oral Histories of Older Gay Men in Hong Kong, which I think was 2014. I should have checked that before, but he had been doing this research into finding a way to represent this history that sort of had never been explored before in Hong Kong. And was, I think he was writing his PhD in relation to this. And sort of conducted a number of interviews and realized that there was kind of no records of these older men. And through recording these histories, he wrote this book. This image on the right is a film that was made in relation to one of these stories called Suk Suk. But in sort of through doing this research, Dr. Travis Kong made this a group called Gay and Grey. So when I went on my residency, I went to meet this group. They meet once a month to talk about topics of their choosing. So this is a bad image. This is my knee in the bottom right-hand corner because partly because a lot of these men didn't want to be photographed. Actually, a lot of them sort of hadn't come out. The day I attended, there was actually a film crew there who were filming for some sort of news report, and they divided the room into two halves, into who wants to be filmed and who doesn't. And probably more than 80% were sort of on the side that doesn't. So I don't really have any documentation other than this. But the time I attended was a group about how to write a will. And this group invite professionals or people expertise who can sort of provide advice on these topics. So this guy was talking about going through the processes of how to write a will. But what interested me particularly was this discussion that sort of happened afterwards or subsequently, was about the need to maybe write a second letter, which would be a declaration to a relative to explain why you would want to leave something to your male lover. So perhaps these relatives know of this male lover, they've met them, but the idea that you would want to leave them wouldn't be accepted. But as long as the relation is a sexual one, then it's okay, or not okay. But this was sort of the discussion that was happening, as well as discussions around the problem of finding care in older age. A lot of the institutions perhaps that run these sort of older homes, if you don't have families, and you have to find a sort of assisted care home, that a lot of them aren't particularly gay friendly. So these were some of the discussions that I was listening to. And then this idea of sort of writing a letter, I started writing my own. I started writing a letter from between a perspective, like an intergenerational relation between an older and a younger man, exploring a series of sort of a series of sexual encounters that sort of explore the shifting dynamics or perceived power dynamics between an older and a younger man, and also about the search for support within points of feeling vulnerable, particularly the sort of the act of the role of care within an act of sex between a younger and an older man. And then as I was writing it, as I was writing this letter, I thought initially it might be like a sound piece. Then I discovered this bird garden. So what you see in the background is this bird in a cage is comes from this birdcage garden in Hong Kong called Whampoa Bird Garden. I think I've been mispronouncing that. Yeah, it's a site where men take birds in cages and hang them on poles. So these are pets, these are the birds that are kept at home, and then they take them out and hang them on poles. And the idea is that the birds will lose I think it partly comes from the idea that the bird will lose its sense of song if it doesn't sing to other birds. And so I was thinking about this role of this question of sort of care, this kind of caring gesture that also encouraging the sort of the bird to sing, but then it's always placed within the position of the cage. And also on the other side of this, what you see here, there's this building, and then on the other side of this building is this market where you can buy birds in cages. So yeah, so then so when you take the birdcage to the garden, it gets covered in a material so that it doesn't sort of freak out the bird as it's like going through the city and being sort of overstimulated or scared. So yeah, so I sort of go back to this one. I set part of the narration or the story that I was writing, this letter, part of it started to take the form of a song about wanting to take care, letting someone else take care, not wanting to care and then not caring. And it was sort of, and then I changed. So it follows, there's a structure of this letter where it becomes a bit like a chorus. And then I set this to the backdrop of these birds with karaoke lyrics. And then I performed it in Hong Kong, singing to the songbirds, videos of the songbirds in cages. And then for the other parts, I sort of sat down and then you heard the narration. Maybe I don't think I'm explaining this well, but so there's a part where there's a narration on a black screen where you just hear the sounds of the city, which is a bit like replicating the idea of the bird being taken through the city. And then that's interspersed with these choruses singing to birds around this like series of care. Yeah. I'm not going to show a video of this because it feels like quite important to see it from beginning to end. This is the only video I've ever made that has a beginning and an end. So yeah, so this is another section of the chorus. So yeah, in its current form in Frankfurt, you see the karaoke, the bits where you have the birds, you see the karaoke lyrics as sort of an encouragement for, or to maybe to sort of implicate the viewer in the process of this, like wanting to care, not wanting to care, and kind of as an invitation to sort of sing to these birds in cages. And you hear the sounds of the songs of the birds. So yeah, so that was the show in Frankfurt, and now I'm kind of going backwards. So this is a work called Clear as a Bell, which was a work I made around signaling. So this is a model railway layout. I'll show you. Maybe there's a better still in a minute. This is a model railway layout in the National Railway Museum. I heard this before I saw them actually, but there's a group of volunteers, these men in waistcoats, and there's a gentleman I don't think you can see, but he's got a microphone standing in front of a purple box where he is demonstrating to the public in the museum how this works. So how this like form of signaling works, and how they do that is to demonstrate train crashes that have happened in real life from the past, that have happened due to signaling failures, in order to talk about the importance of this form of signaling. So here are some other images of the museum. And this is the language of block signaling. It's a bit like Morse code. And so I actually I did learn to speak this language. I went to evening classes, block signaling evening classes with the volunteers, so that I could sort of understand the coded language that was going on. And I like the idea that that this was almost like a secret language of signaling that no one else can read. And I mean, I was kind of thinking about in a cruising space, or when you're sort of used to go to the British Library in London, which was like a cruising ground, and you could sort of have this act of like cruising other men in a space where no one else sort of knows like what's going on, and no one can see this like hidden language of cruising. And I kind of was thinking about this. I mean, this is not what these men are doing, but I was thinking about the idea of like a secret language of signals, and it's also a form of like language that's dying. So because it's being replaced with digital technology. So this is a bad photograph, but this is basically what signaling looks like now. So this is in York, I should say, in near the National Railway Museum. I did a tour of operating signal boxes in the area. This one I found interesting because it's literally split in half. Like half the track is updated with this new form of technology when you see the computers, and then the other half has got these levers on the left. And so, yeah, I like this idea that these men were sort of keeping this system alive through their it's almost like treating the railway layout as like a body. So you never actually see a train, it's just purely about signaling. But rather than babble on for a long time, this is an example of like a real operating signal. I'm going to show another quick clip of Clear as a Bell. So yeah, okay. So that's that was a short extract from that. Oops, and then yeah, this is maybe like the last work that I'm going to speak about. This is more walking, which maybe you saw as the still advertised for the talk. This is a film. Maybe I should. I guess I should explain what more walking is. So more walking is the name for an activity where people exercise in shopping malls before they're open to the public, which is a big phenomenon in America in particular. I had a friend who was a mall walker. Basically, that's how I heard about this. Yeah, in a way, it sort of makes sense that actually this is in Omaha, Nebraska, which is where I did a residency at the Bemis Center for Fine Art, and in a way, like the city structures aren't built for walking; they're built for cars, and particularly in a space like Omaha, it gets extremely hot or it gets very cold, and so it's actually quite dangerous to be walking around. And so these shopping malls, they're flat, it's safe, it's either heated or it's air conditioned. And there was this thing that the mall walkers used to say, like 4 laps is a mile. And so this was like an important sort of reference point. And yeah, so I basically, I did this residency for 3 months, and I basically went mall walking for 3 months and sort of embedded myself within this community. And this is my, this was the studio space where I was. It was like a live work. I recommend it. Actually, it's like this amazing residency. You get so much space. And I made a floor plan of both the floors of the mall and the directions in which people walked. And the red lines are sort of things that I wasn't allowed to film. I think there were jewelry stores, and then the yellow signs are like the things that are like kind of places of interest. I showed this to a friend recently who said it's actually quite creepy. There's like this element of sort of surveillance or something that I'm also doing, and in a way I kind of was. That I knew. I literally could sort of tell like when somebody was going to walk around a corner at what time, and there were all these groups. That there was this whole sort of social structure of like the 7 o'clock group, the 8 o'clock group. So it's sort of the malls open up at something like 5:30 specifically for people to exercise. So in the background you can see sort of some stills, and there's some notes. So yeah, I get very obsessive about documenting spaces, and you can't see, but in front of me here is like something similar to this, in that I make notes. I have pictures and diagrams, and sort of trying to translate the thoughts into not the essence of the thing that I'm trying to look at, but for me it was like, okay, the importance of this is the act of walking. So as much as I sort of got to know them all, walkers, socialized, it was like here we go. So this was the 7:30 group, and this is I'm wearing a football top, so I went to a football game with one of them. Yeah, it was the sort of this act of walking that I really wanted to show, and it felt important to be was like this walking with purpose. So I've never had I've actually never had a review in an art magazine, but I have made the front page of the Omaha World Herald. So this was the local newspaper in Omaha, and they had like a 2-page spread around me making this film. And I'm kind of showing it because I'm also just really proud of it. It's actually a really good article, which unfortunately you can't read anymore because they've taken it off the internet. But this yeah, you can see me sort of stalking some more walkers in the bottom there. So maybe, how are we doing for time? Maybe I show you a clip from this, I think. Okay, so we go to this now. Yep.
If you had one for 6 months, then go back and find out every place you've been for 6 months.
There's an article about that. Must have read it on the computer.
Oh,
About that day.
every minute of the day.
But they showed you there was like at least 4 to 5 levels through different venues to get to that place.
Okay, so yeah, that was a clip for more walking. And maybe, I don't know, maybe I can share some of these links or afterwards if people are interested in seeing the full versions of the film. Yeah, so then I'm going to go back to the beginning again because I like a loop. These are some stills again of this car being taken apart. But what I observed, what I noticed as they were taking it apart, that they were taking photographs as well of sort of the insides of the buttons of the I guess the internal, almost like organs of the car, partly as a sort of a record of the damage, but also as a way to kind of as like a manual for when to put it back together again, because every screw, every washer, everything from this car they will attempt to sort of put back together again, if possible. Not everything is, but yeah. So this is also sort of what these photographs are for. So as well as sort of as filming, I've also been collecting the images of the mechanics, which are also kind of amazing and really beautiful forensic sort of imagery. And yeah, I think I will just leave you with a few images, beautiful images that mechanics make. Yeah. So yeah, though I guess thinking of these as like internal organs. I don't know. Maybe I don't need to say anything else, as it's still in progress. But this one reminds me of hemorrhoids. Actually, I don't know. Maybe maybe I end on that. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
That's a
It was
good
really
ending.
great.
Very appropriate.
And we are really looking forward to the Q&A session afterwards. So maybe
And
we
just
choose-
to our viewers behind us is Pia.
Pia?
Hi, Pia.
Hi.
because I'm taking an exchange semester, so this was kind of my last lecture. So Pia is taking over until the next.
Looking
SPARTA
forward to that.
elections.
And very important, we made a newsletter. So please check out our website and go to the newsletter and subscribe. Not to YouTube, maybe as well, but yeah, that's important to stay tuned. And so let's, Rob, meet at, how about 7?
10 minutes after 7 or something?
Yeah, 10 minutes after 7?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Sounds good.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you so
Yeah.
much.
Thanks so much
Super.
and see you soon.
Great.
See you.
See you in a
Bye.
bit. Bye.